The Lower Montauk Branch is a former Long Island Railroad line that starts at Long Island City and runs through southern Queens in neighborhoods like Maspeth, Middle Village, and Richmond Hill on its way to Jamaica. This mostly two-tracked line is the western part of the Montauk Branch, the longest of the Long Island Railroad's 11 branches, and has no third rail. Thus, only diesel-powered locomotive trains can run here.
The Lower Montauk was built in 3 stages. In 1854, the New York and Flushing Railroad built a line from Long Island City to Haberman, where it ran northeast to Winfield, connecting to the main line. In 1868, the South Side Railroad of Long Island built the part between Jamaica and Bushwick. The Long Island Railroad took over both companies in the 1870s, renamed as the Brooklyn and Montauk Railroad. Hence the name Montauk Branch. A connection was made between Fresh Pond and Haberman, forming the present Lower Montauk, and the Haberman to Winfield section was closed for unknown reasons.
With 9 intermediate stations and no other rail service nearby, it was one of the most heavily used rail lines in Queens. Until the early 1900s, Long Island City was the railroad's main western terminal. Riders from points east would get off there after traveling down the Lower Montauk and cross the East River on ferries to get to Manhattan. News sources state that as many as 3,200 people used the Lower Montauk in winter 1912, and that number rose to 5,000 the following summer. In 1910, the opening of the East River tunnels connecting the Long Island Railroad's main line, which runs through Forest Hills, Kew Gardens, and Woodside a few miles north of the Lower Montauk to Penn Station, led to a gradual drop in use of Long Island City, as Long Island Railroad riders now had a direct ride into Manhattan. That stop today only sees 10 trains per weekday and is used mainly as a storage yard, after the Long Island Railroad moved most of its trains that stopped there to Penn Station, its new main western terminal. The main line became more favorable for riders, not just because of this, but Hunters Point Avenue, a tiny station on it only a few blocks from Long Island City, being easy to connect with the 7 train station of the same name, their entrance stairs were literally meters apart on the same street. Thus, the Long Island Railroad, over the decades, shifted most of its Lower Montauk trains to the main line so they could stop there. Ridership on the Lower Montauk fell as a result, and by 1940, 4 of its 9 stations, Laurel Hill, Maspeth, Ridgewood, and Dunton, closed, as their declining usage made it not worth the cost to maintain them. Further dropping use of the branch was the expansion of the New York City subway to the other boroughs, creation of interborough express bus service, and industrialization of the surrounding areas, especially west of Fresh Pond, so residents had their own vehicles or a faster, more frequent way of getting into Manhattan. By 2005, just 2 scheduled peak-hour trains, both from the Oyster Bay branch, used the Lower Montauk per weekday. The morning train was number 507, and the evening train was number 560. 2 other peak trains also ran on the Lower Montauk until March 16, 1998, when the Long Island Railroad closed its 5 remaining stations: Richmond Hill, Glendale, Fresh Pond, Haberman, and Penny Bridge. What led to their abandonment were their really low usage. Each stop only served 1 to 5 riders a day, and the fact that only Richmond Hill had an actual platform for customers. The other stops had no timetables, chairs, or ticket offices to indicate they were rail stations, and required riders to wait beside the tracks and literally climb aboard trains. With the C3 double-deckers replacing the railroad's older diesel trains at the time, they would need costly high-level platforms to stay in service. Clearly, it was not worth the time or the money to make these upgrades for such a small amount of riders and trains, so those on the lower Montauk now ran non-stop between Jamaica and Long Island City. In May 2010, as a part of the MTA's massive service cuts to close a major budget deficit, train number 560 was rerouted to the main line to replace another canceled scheduled train, leaving train number 507 as the only one to run on the lower Montauk. But everyone knew it would be moved to the main line too, eventually, which occurred in November 2012, ending 158 years of passenger service on the lower Montauk. The prime reason for the Long Island Railroad abandoning the lower Montauk was a federal law passed in 2010 requiring all commuter rails to install a new system called positive train control, meant for improving human safety by increasing train control monitoring on their tracks by 2015. To keep that line in service, the Long Island Railroad would have to install this expensive system along its entirety. For the same reason its 5 stops were closed in 1998, it was not worth the time or money to install positive train control on the branch for just 1 revenue train a day. The more feasible solution was to shift the train and a few non-revenue runs to the main line. The Long Island Railroad even handed full control of the lower Montauk to its freight partner, the New York and Atlantic Railway, turning it into a freight-only branch and forever changing the book of rules for its usage. Like the closed branches of Bay Ridge, Manhattan Beach, Rockaway Beach, Whitestone, and Bushwick, in the end, drop in ridership and high costs led the Long Island Railroad to abandon a line they used so heavily years ago.